Hello, my name is Kevin Thompson, and today I will be covering the CSS IDs and comparing them to CSS classes. Um, as we know, the websites are made up of HTML, uh, and CSS is what decorates that plain HTML with colors and spaces and fonts, among other things. But CSS needs a way to identify what to decorate in the HTML. This can be done in a few ways, and two of those ways we'll be discussing today. So as you can see here on my right side, we have my poem page, and we have the corresponding HTML and CSS on the left over here. HTML tags have attributes. So this anchor tag has an href attribute, and that href attribute has a value, in this case of pound. Well, two of these special attributes are ID and class. These can be found on most tags. In HTML5, tags were added such as head and title. These can now have classes, and IDs. So this is acceptable now to have a class of head in your head tag, or an ID title in your title tag. Now, just because you can do that doesn't mean you should. There's very little use for it, and it's not very commonly used. Prior to HTML5, that would cause your web page to not be able to be validated, but that is now acceptable in HTML5. When comparing IDs and classes, I've heard them referred to as serial numbers and barcodes. If you think about going to the grocery store, a serial numbered item is unique in that grocery store. There's only one of those serial numbers in the entire store. Whereas all of the canned soups, chicken noodle soups will have the same barcode. They will all be the same item per se. So let's look at IDs. We know that they're unique. So in this example, my div has an ID attribute with value of menu. I only have one menu on my web page. So this is the menu. If I had more than one menu, then maybe I would name it something like menu main or menu top. And then my other menu would be named something like menu sidebar or wherever that menu was, something to distinguish that other menu from this menu. But since I only have one menu, I'm going to leave it ID of menu. This gives us some special functionality on top of the CSS, such as you can see down here if I scroll down on my web page, I have an ID of footer. It's the only footer on the web page. So what the URL allows me to do is I can say, hey, find me the ID of footer. And there it did. It found it right there on the bottom with my little copyright. And if I wanted to, I could use the same thing to go back up to the menu. So it's just kind of a unique feature of IDs for navigation. Now, let's look at here. So I have some of my IDs commented out, some CSS, but let's uncomment it out and see what happens. So I have my ID of menu, and there we see it gives it a beautiful blue background. Because it is the only tag that has that ID of menu, it's the only one affected. But we're going to go ahead and comment that out because that is just really ugly and it hurts my eyes. So we'll uncomment this one out. This is a menu, and we did something a little different that I won't be discussing today, but I just saying, hey, after the ID of menu, any tag line item, give it some height and width and padding and display it in line. And there we see it did the change. We can also see that give our header, which is what's wrapping the top portion menu. Let's give it some extra spacing here to give it separate it from the top a little bit. So we can see there it gave it some padding all the way around. And then we also wrapped the main content of our page in this content div. This content ID div. And we are going to give it some font change. So there you can see it affected everything in here, but it left the menu alone and the footer. And then we're going to uncomment this out here, this ID of target. And that should turn the text purple. So there we see that it's the only one, the only div to turn purple. Or in this case, it's actually a paragraph. So if I was to take that off, it would turn normal again. And I could come down here and give it to, let's give it to this one instead. And suddenly that one's now purple. So that's what IDs do. They're unique to that tag. There's only one that exists on the entire page. Let's compare that to the classes. Classes are not unique. They're what allow us to give continuity and repetition, and that's consistent styling feel throughout our page. So things such as this, we have our class of poem. So we can see here every class, every div that is wrapped around a poem, I gave it that class poem. We can come over to our styling here and uncomment that out. And that is actually going to give us some Azure background. And then let's give this the same size, but Arial font. So now we have that affecting all those as well that are in the poem tag. We can also do something what I did here in the menu bar. You'll see it's pretty common in tables or in things that are listing things just to make it easier on your eyes. I gave the class of odd to the first and the third, and the class of even to the second thing. If I had a fourth thing, I would obviously give that one an even and the fifth thing an odd. But what we can do here is uncomment these out, and you can see in our menu bar here, it gives us that kind of the striped feel. If it was, this is a horizontal stripe, but it gives us those reusable designs and styles that we can use throughout our page. So just to recap, IDs are unique. They should be the only one on the entire page. They're the serial numbers versus the classes, which are kind of reusable styling that can be used throughout the web page to create that continuity. CSS, however, doesn't care. As you notice that I put a font feature in a class, but I also put a font in my ID. You can do whatever you can do in an ID, you can also do in a class. So if I was, take that out, it goes back to, it uses, either one is interchangeable. So any of these features. You can also have both ID and class in one tag. So you can see here, this div has an ID of main body and a class of container. That's totally acceptable. In fact, it's actually very common to find those in both, in a tag, in a single tag, to have both an ID and a class. So that concludes my presentation. Please leave any comments and questions in the section below, and I will address them. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.